Hi everyone, Chris here and welcome to my channel. In today's video I'm going to share with you my TBR for Historathon 3.0. This is a month-long readathon focused on reading historical fiction. It is hosted by Lindsey, Amanda, and Gloria. I'll link their channels and announcement videos in the description below. And this round has a theme of a stitch in time. So basically, you're going to be picking books based on something to do with the book before it. I think it'll make more sense as I get into it. I do know that the first book and prompt is Lost in the title, and the group book that they're reading, I'll pop a picture of it up here, has the word Lost in the title, but I didn't have access to that book, so instead I'm going to be reading The Lost History of Stars by Dave Bowling. In this book, we're in South Africa at the turn of the century during the Boer War, and we're following 14-year-old Letty and her family who are in a concentration camp after being forced there by British soldiers. So I have absolutely no idea anything about this period, but it sounds like it's going to be a very different kind of historical fiction to what I'm used to, since I don't think I've read one set in South Africa, and I certainly haven't read about this time period or the Boer War in general, so I thought this was a perfect opportunity to pick this up, and it was the only historical fiction with the word Lost in the title, and I really did try to find historical fictions that happened to already be ones I owned. So, the second book, and this is how it connects to the first one, must be set in a different country than your first book. So this book is set in South Africa, and I'm going to be reading How High the Moon, which is set in the Jim Crow South, which is the United States. So we're following 12-year-old Ella, who spends her days fishing and running around the small town of Alcolu, South Carolina, with her cousins. But things aren't always so nice for her because she's lighter skinned, so she gets bullied. And her mother is a jazz singer up north, and she ends up going to visit her mom for Christmas, but doesn't expect to uncover new truths about her mother, the father she never knew, and her family's most unlikely history. So very different vibes than book one with, you know, we're in the Jim Crow South versus South Africa during the Boer War. This is also a middle grade, I believe, so I'm assuming there'll be different vibes there. And yeah, hopefully I will love it, and it's another book that I owned, so very excited about that. Then we need to read a book that has a similar cover to our previous book, and I went with Catching Falling Stars. So the reason I did this is because they both have stars all over them. We both have a silhouette of a girl with buildings in the background, and they just both give me pretty similar vibes, even though they are completely different colors. So this one is set in the Blitz in 1941, and we're following Gloria and her little brother who have been sent to the countryside away from the war. And to Gloria, being evacuee feels even worse than the threat of falling bombs, and the woman they must live with is cold and unwelcoming, and the village children are just as unfriendly. And even in the country, they're not safe from enemy planes. But what Gloria doesn't know is that her life is about to change in ways she never imagined. So far, again, I'm getting quite a bunch of different vibes with my choices, which was another thing I was trying to do, is not choose all like World War II historical fiction, because that can be very easy to do. This is also a middle grade, so another one I'm hoping I enjoy. And now on to the next prompt. I need to read a book set in a different decade in this. So this book is set in 1941, so I need to read a book that's not set in the 40s, so I will be reading Lady Rights or Wrong by Eliza Casey. This is the second book in the Manor Cat mystery series, and I believe it is set in the 1910s. Yes, it says Danby Hall, Yorkshire, autumn 1912. So this book is set in the 1910s. And in this series, we're following Lady Cecilia, and she lives in a manor with her parents and her brother. And in this book, she's going to be dealing with the women's suffrage union meeting that she's attending. And Mrs. Prowse is found dead at the foot of the stairs in her home, her Votes for Women sash torn away. And so Cecilia, along with her lady's maid and intelligent cat Jack, has to figure out who done it. I really, really enjoyed the first book in this series, and I'm very excited to be diving back in to this series and getting to continue on with it. And again, kind of different vibes here, as this is a historical fiction mystery, so the historical part is less forefront, but it does still count. Then I need to read a book who has an author who has the same first letter of their last name. So this one was Casey, and I'm going to read We Were Strangers Once by Betsy Carter. So C's. In this book, we're on the eve of World War II, and we're following Egon Schneider, a successful Jewish doctor and son of two world-famous naturalists, and he escapes Germany to an uncertain future across the sea. He ends up settling in Manhattan and trying to find his place, and he does so by getting together with a tight-knit group of fellow immigrants, and they're drawn together as much by their differences as they are by their memories of the worlds they've left behind. And it says, when their little community is faced with an existential threat, these strangers rise up together in hopes of creating a permanent home. So it sounds like it's going to be quite the interesting read, and again, have completely different vibes to all of the other books, because, I mean, I technically have one that was set during World War II, but this is a completely different kind of view of World War II, so that should be kind of interesting. Then the next book I chose has to have fewer pages than We Were Strangers Once, and We Were Strangers Once clocks in at 307 pages. So for this, I'm going to read Fly Girl by Sherry L. Smith, which is 271. In this book, we're following Issa, who wants to be a pilot just like her dad, but she's a young black woman, so that's not really an option. Until America enters World War II and the Army forms the Women Air Force Service Pilots, and she has a chance to join if she's to use her light skin to pass as a white girl. So we're basically going to be following Ida as she tries to fulfill her dreams while dealing probably with some racism and having to decide whether her dreams are worth sacrificing part of her identity for. So I've been wanting to get to this one for a while, and this was the perfect opportunity to pick it up. Then the next book needed to be a different race, so obviously I'm reading about a black woman in this one, and so I'm going to read Water for Elephants by Sarah Gruen. As far as I know, the main characters in this one are white. There is no description on this book, which really annoys me. I know that it's been turned into a movie that stars Reese Witherspoon and Robert Pattinson, and I believe it is a romantic murder mystery kind of thing. One of the blurbs says, gritty, sensual, and charged with dark secrets involving love, murder, and a majestic mute heroine. So I've heard really good things about it, and again, it feels very different to all of the other books I've picked out, because it's set in a historic time, and I believe it has something to do with the circus, and maybe, I think our main male character might end up falling for, like, the ringmaster's wife or something like that from what I remember reading, but I'm very excited to check this out because I've heard good things, and it might be fun to watch the movie afterwards. Then, and my entire TBR was built around this specific book. I had to find a book that was blurbed by Sarah Gruen, because you had to read a book blurbed by your previous author. And I only had one, and that was sold on a Monday. And the very, very tippy top of this book says, Christina McMorris does what few writers can, transport me right into the middle of the story. Sarah Gruen, author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Water for Elephants. So this book is blurbed by the author of this one. And I was not sure which way it was supposed to go, whether I needed to read this one first and then this one, but I'm pretty sure I've got it the right way around. This is the way we're going with, because that's how I interpreted it when I watched the videos, was that this book had to be blurbed by the previous author. So, sold on a Monday, is set in 1931, and it says, but it could be found anywhere in an era of bread lines, bank runs, and broken dreams. And basically, we're following a struggling reporter named Ellis Reed, and the gut-wrenching scene evokes memories of his family's dark past. He snaps a photograph of the children not meant for publication, but when it leads to his big break, the consequences are more devastating than he ever imagined. I should probably mention that the first thing you see is 2 children for sale. Is that sign? That's what the gut-wrenching scene is referring to. And then it says, at the paper, Lillian Palmer is haunted by her role in all that happened. She is far too familiar with the heartbreak of children deemed unwanted. As the bonds of motherhood are tested, she and Ellis must decide how much they are willing to risk to mend a fractured family. It was inspired by actual newspaper photograph. So I'm very curious to see how this is going to play out. It sounds like it could be quite gut-wrenching. And again, very different vibes, which was a lot of the goals. And then the last prompt actually was the hardest to fulfill and was the only one I couldn't pull from my own library, and that was to read a book that had the same number of letters as your previous title. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I'll be reading Her Last Flight by Beatrice Williams. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I had to go to the library for this one. So in this one, it's 1947, and photographer and war correspondent Janie Everett arrives at a remote surfing village on the Hawaiian island of Kauai to research a planned biography of forgotten aviation pioneer Sam Mallory, who joined the Loyalist forces in the Spanish Civil War and never returned. Obsessed with Sam's fate, Janie has tracked down Irene Lindquist, the owner of a local island-hopping airline, whom she believes might actually be the legendary Irene Foster, Mallory's one-time student and flying partner. Foster's disappearance during a round-the-world flight in 1937 remains one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries. At first, the flinty Mrs. Lindquist denies any connection to Foster, but Janie informs her that the wreck of Sam Mallory's airplane has recently been discovered in a Spanish desert, and piece by piece the details of Foster's extraordinary life emerges. From the beginnings of her flying career in Southern California to her complicated, passionate relationship with Mallory, to the collapse of her marriage to her aggressive career manager, the publishing scion George Morrow. As Irene spins her tale to its searing conclusion, Janie's own turbulent past gathers power. The duel between the two women takes a heart-stopping turn. What really happened to Mallory all those years ago? Can we ever come to terms with the loss of those we love and the lives we might have lived? So, even though it wasn't off of my TBR physically, it was on my Goodreads TBR. It was one I wanted to get to, and I'm very excited to be reading this. So these are the books I'm going to be reading for Historathon. Are you taking part? If so, let me know what you're reading in the comments section below. All of my social media, including my Discord, is linked in the description below if you'd like to come chat with me. If you've made it this far in the video, leave me plane emojis, since I have 2 books on here that have something to do with planes. Like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!